In a quiet fold of Burgundy, France, the town of Cluny hides a memory so large that what remains today feels like a whisper. Once, a church rose here that dwarfed its age, a stone colossus called Maior Ecclesia, the great church. Only a fraction survives. The rest was scattered into the town's walls, courtyards and gardens, like a titan dissolved into dust. Imagine pillars stretching higher than 30 meters, a nave longer than Notre-Dame in Paris, and hundreds of windows washing stone with daylight. This was the greatest abbey church of medieval Western Christendom, raised by monks in the 11th and 12th centuries, and for 500 years it stood unmatched. It answered directly to Rome, and people called it a second Rome. Then came the Revolution. Abandoned, sold, and dismantled, Cluny's masterpiece was broken down stone by stone, not toppled in a day, but harvested for profit. The Abbey city, once spanning roughly 15 hectares, about half the footprint of today's Vatican, was swallowed by streets and houses. Yet the puzzle pieces still glint through: lintels, capitals, and portal fragments, medieval relics repurposed into modern walls. The south transept that remains, crowned with an octagonal tower once soaring more than 60 meters, offers a scale check. Even this single arm of the cross-shaped plan is the size of a typical church. It hints at what stood here: a basilica 187 meters long, with double aisles, 2 transepts, a sweeping choir, and a ring of radiant chapels. For a century, archaeologists and historians have chased Cluny through foundations and archives. A single plan from around 1700, carefully drawn by an anonymous hand, became a Rosetta Stone. Combined with digs, stone analysis, and digital reconstructions, it let scholars re-inflate the vanished volumes and trace the builder's bold solutions. Cluny's site was awkward, wedged between 2 waterways and climbing a valley slope. The monks first tamed the ground, cutting terraces into the hillside and laying colossal foundations, chasing solid rock as deep as 4 meters. Under the transepts, foundation walls swelled to 5 meters wide. Beneath walls and piers, a grid of thick masonry tied the structure together, so if the soil shifted, the building would move as one body rather than crack apart. Modern simulations confirm it. Without these buried ties, the church would not have stood. The ambition was height, space, and light, beyond Romanesque norms. Semicircular vaults push hard sideways and demand thick walls with small windows. Cluny's masons turned to the pointed or Gothic arch. With thrust redirected more vertically, walls could climb higher and grow thinner. The great nave stacked 3 tiers, roughly 10, 17, and nearly 30 meters, pierced by generous windows that turned almost half of the wall area into openings. Light poured in, not just for beauty, but as theology in stone, illumination as a metaphor for the divine. But height courts danger. To keep the giant balanced, the design staggered side aisles and braced outer walls with hefty buttresses. Iron clamps stitched masonry at critical joints. Long iron tie bars spanned the transepts to keep the walls from drifting outward. Nothing was left to faith alone, only what calculation and craft could secure. The walls still speak. Rows of square holes, putlog holes, mark where medieval scaffolding stood. In the surviving transept, a subtle offset in these holes and misaligned windows reveals a mid-project decision. The monks raised the target height by about 10 meters. The dream grew as the work rose. Cluny sat amid abundant materials. Forests cloaked the valley. Rivers gave sand and clay. Most importantly, local quarries, some within a few kilometers, fed stones of varied strengths, micrite for crushing loads, tough sandstone for rigidity, and softer limestones for carving. Walls were built with two dressed faces, packed with rubble and lime mortar, a time-tested technique that climbs astonishingly high when made broad. From one quarry came an audacious single slab, about 6 meters by 3 by half a meter, the tympanum for the west door. The monks didn't risk carving it on the ground. They engineered its journey first. Ramps softened slopes, rollers eased the haul, and a hoisting jack, levering weight by 100-fold, lifted the 28-ton stone into place. Only then did chisels release Christ and angels from the limestone's depth, so boldly that in places just 5 centimeters of stone remained. Inside, more than 200 capitals crowned the forest of pillars, many echoing Corinthian forms, an intentional glance back to antiquity. Around the choir, real Roman marble columns were reused and trimmed, staging Cluny as heir to imperial grandeur. The scale of ornament matched the scale of space. Built in less than 70 years, astonishing for the Middle Ages, Cluny still faced a crisis. Around 1125, a vault failed somewhere in the church. Long structures flex. The monks responded like vigilant engineers, climbing stairways hidden in the thick walls to inspect high vaults. Where needed, they thickened inner walls under the vaults and opened arches through them to keep sight lines, an early move toward what later cathedrals would externalize as flying buttresses. Cluny stood at the threshold, Romanesque in heritage, already thinking Gothic. Consecrated in 1095 and completed by the 1130s, the church then reached west with a grand narthex, a processional forecourt, flanked by 2 towers. The hillside forced a downward entry, so pilgrims stepped into the church by descending, a physical bow toward the sacred east. Cluny was more than a church. It was a fortified, functioning city. Gates, towers, guest houses for pilgrims. Water systems ran beneath the cloister and kitchens, feeding fountains and even flushing latrines. 2 waterways were harnessed with dams and canals. Mills multiplied along the diverted flow, turning water into wealth. In an age when controlling water signaled power, Cluny mastered it. As stone climbed, influence spread. Rooted in the spirituality of Saint Benedict, the Abbey's rule radiated across Europe. At its height, Cluny oversaw hundreds of dependent monasteries, from England to Spain, Italy to Poland. Donations and royal patronage swelled the coffers. The abbot of Cluny corresponded with emperors and popes. At times, even Rome could not ignore Cluny's voice. Time changes all things. The 15th century saw the first ebb. In the 16th, Cluny's special tie to Rome loosened and revenues slipped. By the French Revolution, the abbey's fate was sealed. Sold off in parcels in the 1790s, its great church became a quarry for the modern town. That is why today, wandering Cluny's lanes, you may spot a carved fragment in a garden or a reused capital in a wall, a giant broken into 1,000 souvenirs. Yet the loss is not total. The south transept stands. 18th century drawings survive. Foundations still crisscross the earth, telling stories to those who can read stone. In the early 20th century, American archaeologist Kenneth J. Conant drew hundreds of plans from trenches and fragments, giving scholars a first full sense of the vanished volumes. Later, computers layered precision onto intuition, confirming the old builder's genius: tie the soil, sort the stones, redirect the thrusts, stitch the masonry with iron, and above all, let light in. Cluny must be earned. It won't announce itself, but if you pause before the transept, trace a putlog hole with your eyes, or find a rescued capital bathed in museum light, the giant stirs. This was more than stone. It was an idea that faith, craft, and mathematics could lift a city toward the sky and keep it there.